Hey guys, what is up? Swim here. We are only a couple of days away from the Runeterra launch, and I'm back with probably this might be my last deck guide for my list. Right now, I have about 10 different decks that I think are all different degrees of powerful. Some of them are a bit more fun than powerful, and this is not an example of that. Well, actually, I mean, it is pretty fun, but it is what I would probably consider a tier 1 deck. Now, I know, I don't want to be that guy who, like, comes, you know, basically every video I say, oh, this is a tier 1 deck, you know, blah, 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 blah. So I'm doing revisions, like I said, my Marauder deck, which I said in the video, I said that could have been tier 1. I've definitely bumped that. That one's not tier 1. Legion Marauder was kind of like a more fun concept, a very unique deck, but ends up not being as powerful. But additionally, I mean, obviously, the decks that I'm building during this period are going to be decks that I think are very strong. And I'm also doing, like, tinkering with a lot of ideas that end up not working that I don't end up showing off, right? So, naturally, I'm going to be showing you guys the decks that I make that end up being, in my opinion, tier 1. So, even though this is a tier 1 deck, it's probably a bit weaker than Dawn Spiders, just because it's a bit more vulnerable to draws. Whereas Dawn Spiders, which is probably my pick for the single strongest deck in the game right now, Dawn Spiders is much more reliable. All of your cards kind of combo with each other in very powerful ways, right? So that, you know, you kind of never really have to draw like specific combo kits. But basically, as you'll see, this is a deck that I've been calling Great White Sharks. This is effectively using a similar concept with, you know, the Hecarim CHARIOT decks that you might have seen pretty much always running in Ionia, except we are using Demacia instead, and I would say this is noticeably better than the Ionian version, like quite a bit better, actually. The reason for that is because we have some tools that just fit better in the archetype. Most notably, Lucian, Vanguard Redeemer, Silverwing Vanguard, Remembrance, and the Almighty back-to-back, okay? So how this is going to boil down is basically we are going to often be using the combo of like Lucian with Haunted Relic. I'm just going to breeze through this intro for those of you guys who know like the kind of Shark Chariot idea. You know, because Shark Chariots are always coming back and then always dying again, they are great ways of being able to get more value out of flipping your Lucian, great ways of being able to discount your Remembrance. This deck plays 0 mana Remembrances quite often. If you have a hand with even 1 Remembrance, when you get it discounted to like 1 mana or 2 mana or 0 mana, of course, it's incredibly powerful. And we'll talk more about, you know, what that card offers later. And then, of course, Redeemer is just a generally good card. You've seen it in Dawn Spiders. This is a very powerful card in Demacia in general, especially when you combine it with Shadow Isles. And Silverwing Vanguard, the ability for this card to represent other ways of triggering your deaths. This card is a great way of getting Remembrance to 0 mana, because you are basically just, you know, getting it killed off intentionally sometimes. The idea of, you know, a 4-2-1 challenger that has a clone is just strong in general. It's great in late game board states, and it's going to do very well to basically fully occupy the board. And finally, the really big synergy point in this deck, one of the big reasons that this is better than the Ionia version, I mean, Remembrance and Lucian fit this idea very, very, very well, but even on top of that, the synergy point between the idea of like Sharks Hecarim and multiple attacks on the same turn also fits the speed and game plan of this list very well. When you draw multiple Lucians, you are going to get a Relentless Pursuit, which gets you a free attack, which in Shark Chariot terms means you're basically just going to be, you know, shoving it down the opponent's throat. They're not going to be able to do a lot about that. Extra attacks with the Shark Chariot is just what you want with this deck, because you'll just be able to burn the opponent down and force them to block and play defense, right? Because every time, like, Shark Chariot's value is just predicated on your ability to attack more, right? And on top of that, Lucian also gives you rallies when allies die. So you're getting more attacks with Shark Chariot, which is how this deck wants to play. And lastly, this is a deck that was put together with the help of Precipic, Nib, and Endon from my chat. So this is a deck that is a collaborative effort. All right, now that we've got the general, you know, breakdown of how the list functions, very basic, let's go ahead and talk about the metrics. Like I said, this is a deck that I would say is tier 1. I think it's better than the Ionian version straight up. I actually think it's not even close. And on top of that, I think that this is a very fun deck. So even though it's probably going to have a bit less of a win rate on ladder, like low ladder win rate than Dawn Spiders, it's very powerful, and I'm definitely going to be playing on a ladder. Maybe not day one, but this is a deck that I will be trying in the first week of the game for sure, I think. It's super fun to play, and it's pretty difficult to play as well. There's a lot of pre-planning and thinking you have to do, especially when it comes down to your remembrance mana and floating mana in the early rounds of the game. The first like 4 rounds of this game with this deck are very difficult to play out, and there's a lot of like complex spot calls. And one last thing, as always, check out the Mobalytics link in the pinned comments, because that's going to show a version of the list that is constantly being updated by me, which means that, you know, it's going to be a more recent version than the version you're seeing on this video, maybe even by time of posting, because I record these videos and it takes a while to like edit them, and I'm constantly thinking about decks, and I'm constantly making improvements and adjustments. So if you want to see an improved version, it already might be up there. So if that sounds like the deck for you, then stick around. Now that we've broken down the basics of the list, I'm going to go ahead and basically run through each card. If you want to kind of skip this process and go straight to the gameplay, there's going to be, you know, a comment with the pinned timestamp to that. And we're going to do 3 games this time instead of the, you know, 1 that I've been doing in these videos. Okay. So now to the deck build. Let's go by order of importance. I think that's more important. We've already talked about Remembrance, but let's see how this breaks down. So Remembrance can pull 3 cards. That is Radiant Guardian. When I'm summoned to grant me lifesteal and tough if an ally died this round. This is a very powerful card. This is a card that is runnable on its own. This is a competitive level card. You can run this as a tech option in a deck like Dawn Spiders if you think it's going to be like an aggro meta. This is a very powerful card. Lifesteal is a premium keyword in Runeterra because the games are often a lot more about like racing than anything else, and you can often get 2 hits with that. So the next thing you can get is Lancer, and that's going to be Swiftwing Lancer, which is a great value tool. Look at this, 5/5/4 Challenger, and it creates an elite in hand when it dies. So that's also a sweet thing to pull with Remembrance, right? This is not quite a constructed level card, but again, when Remembrance is discounted to like 2 mana, these cards become completely insane. And the last one is Cavalry. That's Vanguard Cavalry, vanilla tool, not constructed level. You know, these Swiftwing Lancer actually might be constructed level, maybe. It's pretty close. Cavalry is definitely not constructed level. It's not a bad card, but it's more like a budget or expedition card. But again, when this is like a 2 mana price tag, suddenly you're like, whoa, with a deal like that, I'd be stupid not to buy it. It's like buy one, get one free. It's like, it's crazy. 2 manas. So nuts. Okay, so that's Remembrance. Hecarim, you know, we all know and love Hecarim. You know, we've seen Hecarim decks, Chariot decks on ladder. Basically, the idea is every time you attack, you're going to be summoning these Spectral Riders that are, summoning these Spectral Riders that have 3 attack, and those in turn are going to summon your Shark Chariots, which also have 3 attacks. This card is a very key component of this list, because every time you attack with Haunted Relic, or Hecarim, or something from Fading Memories, or another Shark Chariot, it'll summon all other Shark Chariots, and you'll basically get a lot more wide of an attack, right? So Hecarim is your big bomb finisher. This card is just absolutely crazy. Super nuts card. Hard carries the like Shark Chariot deck. He's so good you can run him at vanilla value. Let's just go ahead. Let's compare this card to Darius. And I know Darius is a bad card, but like just for funsies. Like look at this comparison. Look at this comparison. Hecarim has 1 more health. That one health is a big deal, by the way. He has 10 attack worth of stats, and that's distributed across 3 different things, right? Because it's a 4 and 2 3s. So you've got 10 attack worth of stats already, and you have no additional condition for this. If anything, instead of having a condition to get more, you actually just have a condition, or sorry, instead of having a condition to hit that 10 attack damage, because Darius goes to 10, you instead have a condition that if you attack with enough ephemerals, it gets even stronger, right? And it works with Chariot. Hecarim is just a super powerful tool, and again, this is kind of the reason why Shark Chariot is a popular deck. So back to back. You know, if you watch my stream, if you watch these videos, you've probably heard me talk about back-to-back. This card is actually insane, the more I think about it. It's one of the reasons to play Demacia. Strongest combat trick in the game. It's really uninteractable, which is insanely powerful in this game. It will just kind of like smash board states really freely. The big thing about back-to-back that makes it good in this game that wouldn't be true in a game like Magic the Gathering is that because when you go into an open attack, like when you attack before playing your mana to disallow either player from playing their mana before the attack, back to back, whichever player is attacking, it doesn't matter. Back to back is super premium in that situation because you're basically putting mana on the board for the combat that you're denying your opponent the ability to use their mana for that combat, right? So it sort of achieves a different sort of tempo almost, which is very unique because there's very few things that can reliably put so much tempo on board at fast speed that's not even counterable by something like Deny, for example. Silverwing Vanguard, when I'm summoned, summon an exact copy of me. This is a pretty solid card. It's one of the best cards in Elites. I don't end up slotting in Dawn Spiders. Currently it's a 0 of in my Dawn Spiders deck, but I did experiment with it. It was actually close to running for a little bit. I ended up just not quite running Vanguard. But it's a solid card. It is constructed level, and in this deck it's great. Because, of course, you know, having 2 bodies on the board, you're triggering more deaths for your illusion. You know, having a bit of Challenger is going to help you basically get that that punch that you need at the end. If the opponent has, like, 1 big unit, you just Challenger it with Vanguard so they can't block your Hecarim. So that Hecarim, you know, it stays alive for a second attack. And that's going to be very valuable as well. The Vanguard Redeemer, when I'm summoned, draw a unit if an ally died this round. Obviously, you've seen this in Dawn Spiders. Super powerful card in just Demacia in general, and we're going to be getting a free card draw with it in a lot of situations. Again, it's good with these open attack scenarios where you're going to be able to use your mana for value and kind of replenish your hand. Got 2 Vile Feasts in this deck, so this is kind of crazy. In any normal deck, we would run 3 Vile Feast. Vile Feast is one of the most staple cards in Shadow Isles. Anything other than just like full aggro Shadow Isles, that's not running Spiders, by the way, because Vile Feast even works with Spiders, kind of has to run 3 Vile Feast. So in this deck, we've actually been able to cut it down to 2. It's a close call, but just because this deck is pretty aggressive and because we do value board space as a resource and we don't want to overemphasize board space, having 2 Vile Feasts actually does end up fine in this deck. We also have, you know, additional sacrifice targets. So I think Vile Feast, even though it's such a good card, is totally fine as a 2F here. Shark Chariot. Again, you guys know Chariot. Basically, the fact that it just resurrects itself every single attacking phase is really powerful, and that's the whole combo with this deck, right? The ability to just, you know, you play Shark Chariot on turn 2, for your attack, and then on turn 4, maybe you play like Lucian and Haunted Relic. You attack with everything. That's 4 deaths, because Haunted Relic is 3 deaths, and Shark Chariot is 1, so your Lucian like levels up sometimes during that combat phase, right? More on that later, because there's a minor nitpick. But basically, Shark Chariot triggers deaths, which is good for Lucian, it's good for Remembrance, and it's great with Hecarim. Shark Chariot, not more needs to be said about this card, it's very powerful. Lucian himself, this bad boy, he's actually super crazy. If you're able to build a deck that's able to use him, I would say, as a rule of thumb in general, you should really run champions to level them up. I think this is kind of intuitive for a lot of players, but at the same time, I mean, I see a lot of people suggesting Lucian in my Dawn Spiders deck, and I actually don't think he fits that deck very well, just because he has a really hard time leveling up there, and I don't want to run Senna there. But in this deck, Lucian levels up oh so easily and oh so powerfully, right? Just the fact that Relic is, you know, helping my Hecarim levels, it's helping all of my conditions, it's helping my Remembrance, makes Lucian great. Lucian and Remembrance are basically inseparable. If you're running Lucian, you have to run Remembrance and maybe Haunted Relic as well. Now, in like a mono Demacia Elites deck, you could just run like the Lucian Senna, and that's okay. Senna's not a terrible card, she's not. Especially if your deck is, you know, something like that already feels fine against the Avalanche maybe. But I do think that Lucian is a very specific combo card. I don't really like running this card unless I'm kind of more building the deck around him. Whereas I see a lot of people splash him in more vanilla. But basically, the idea behind him is pretty simple. You know, he's a 2/3/2 with quick attack, and when you've gotten 4 allies die, he gets double attack, which is kind of the same thing as double strike in Magic, basically. So if they don't block your Lucian, you will have 8 damage to Nexus, because it will hit their Nexus twice. If you're blocking like a 5/5, Lucian will hit the 5, if it's leveled, Lucian will hit the 5/5, and then they'll both hit each other, which means it'll be a trade, which isn't ideal. You don't want this to trade off. And a lot of times, your leveled Lucian actually hangs back on the bench just so you can make sure you get the second one each turn, this is the most powerful effect here. The first time an ally dies each round, rally. Super, super powerful effect. And again, that's kind of the entire point of this deck. So we're going to basically... an important thing to understand is that it can't do this on the same turn that it levels up. Because when a leveled up Lucian, when it levels up, it then gets this ability. And if it leveled up by seeing an ally die, which it always does, it can only level by having an ally die either way, then the Lucian won't have this, because the leveled up Lucian won't have seen the first time an ally died, because an ally has already died. So important to note, you can't flip Lucian and get this effect on the same turn. So you have to flip him a turn earlier if you want to do like a really aggressive rally, okay? Haunted Relic. This card actually is kind of been baffling me lately. It's a really weird card. I love its design. It's super powerful. But if you saw my control deck, you know, my Shadow Isles Freljord Ultimate control deck that I posted, you might have noticed I didn't run Haunted Relic in that deck. Even though I thought I would when I started that deck build, I ended up cutting it, which makes Haunted Relic a bit of a weird card. In this deck, it's an offensive card. You really want to be using this to push damage. In most decks, it is a defensive card. You'd rather use it on block. And that's honestly, I love this ephemeral keyword. It's a really great keyword for the, just like from a design standpoint of the alternating attack system, because it has a fundamental different concept to whether you're on offense or defense for that turn, right? And that's really cool. It's like a duality, right? So Haunted Relic in this deck, you're going to want to use this on offensive turns typically, but not always. There's a lot of defensive spots where your opponent, you know, especially against the mirror, against other Shark Chariot decks, where, you know, they're about to swing into you in a big way, slap down a Haunted Relic, and they maybe can't attack at all, right? Especially because if they do attack, then they're empowering your Remembrance in hand and potentially your Lucian on board. So even if they might get some chip damage in, they still might feel like they can't attack into a Haunted Relic. Super great in this deck. Great keep in the mulligan. Glimpse Beyond, you guys know this card. Shadow Isles is, so if you watch the videos on this channel a lot, you might notice that most of the decks I post here run Shadow Isles, and Glimpse Beyond, Cursed Keeper, Butcher actually hasn't been in every deck, but Glimpse Beyond and Cursed Keeper have been in every deck. These cards are super, super, super powerful, and they're really, really hard to escape the value out of. The biggest value of Glimpse Beyond is being able to use it on a unit that's blocking. So basically, if you designate a blocker, like a 1/1, like a chump blocker, like a Spider from Vile Feast, or even the little thing from Haunted Relic, the Unleashed Spirit, you can get the block for free while killing your unit. Because if the block is designated, even if the blocker dies, the block still goes through, right? Okay, so yeah, that's Glimpse Beyond, and of course it pairs really well with Cursed Keeper, because it can kill Cursed Keeper. Cursed Keeper, it's honestly, if there's a deck that might be able to escape Cursed Keeper, it is this one. I'm actually looking at this deck and thinking about cutting Keeper for a bit of a specific reason, but it's just so good. The ability to summon a 4/4 is it's so hard to escape. The pair with Butcher is really nice. You know, getting an extra like 0 mana death is neat. And of course, it just kind of pops with everything, right? Like there's just like no real downside to Keeper here, not enough. I mean, even with Fading Memories, there's a bit of a combo built in there. So Cursed Keeper is super good in basically every Shadow Isles deck. I don't think you can escape it. Honestly, Cursed Keeper is this is the strongest card in Shadow Isles. This is the card. This is the reason why Shadow Isles is in kind of every deck. Like, as good as some cards like Hecarim and Rasa are, there's a lot of decks that can't really run cards that play at that speed. Okay, Black Spear, good in general. It's just like spot removal, 2 mana, deal 3. It's fairly aggressive, you know, if an ally died this round, which of course this deck has great ways to trigger, so no brainer there. 3 Fleet Feather Tracker. This is a pretty great card. Basically, the ability for it to represent pushing a little bit of extra damage on this challenger is nuts. I know that this has like been like this has basically been leaked before, right? So I kind of can't be bothered at this point. Honestly. But yeah, Fleet Feather Tracker's ability in this deck to have the challenger and basically push into the opponent with a body is really great. It allows you to protect valuable tools like Lucian and Hecarim. Lucian and Hecarim both have effects that make you want to attack with them, but they both have effects that also make you want to keep them alive. So, because of that, something like Tracker, and this is also true for Elise, by the way, in the Dawn Spiders deck too, but something like Tracker, the ability to have a challenger, opens up your attack in a way that allows you to protect your unit offensively. I can attack with Tracker and Illusion, and my opponent's big 4/4 blocker, you know, if they're running like Escaped Abomination, I just pull with Tracker and just sacrifice Tracker so that it can't block Lucian. And that's super important, right? It's going to be triggering your deaths. It's going to be cheapening your remembrances. It's going to be cheapening, you know, or it's going to be triggering Lucian. So it's an amazing 3-of in this list. Ravenous Butcher, you guys know this card. I have been cutting it down to a 2-of in a lot more decks. I think 3 Ravenous Butchers is usually a trap, except maybe in like a really aggressive Jinx deck or something like that. Yes, I did by the way mention that I think Jinx is proper with Shadow Isles as well. Personally, this might be somewhat disheartening to some of you guys. I believe that Shadow Isles is fairly inescapable as a color. I think the power level and versatility of this color at the current moment is such that I don't know if there will be a tier 1 deck that doesn't run Shadow Isles, which is concerning, and I think that as a balance issue definitely needs to be addressed, because even in a Jinx deck, when I optimized Jinx and when I compared the options between like Ionia, Noxus, and Shadow Isles, I just ended up putting in Shadow Isles in that slot. But yeah, Butcher as a 2-of, a great way to pop Keeper. Sometimes it'll trigger that extra death that you need to push things, so it's a nice 2-of in this deck. And then lastly, we've got Fading Memories, which is a card that I have really fallen in love with. This is a 2 or 3-of in my control deck as well. And basically, the ability for this to exist at burst speed is super important. It can counter a lot of things. As an example, like, you know, the opponent is pushing lethal with a Silent Shadowseer, right? So they play Shadowseer, I use Fading Memories to clone it, and then, because it's burst speed, I immediately put it on board as a blocker, right? So that their Shadowseer just trades even with this, right? Or if the opponent is, you know, developing a unit before attack, you can copy their Avros and Sentry and use their Avros and Sentry as a blocker, and it gets ephemeral too. So there will be hand states where you don't have ways to summon Shark Chariots, and that's really valuable, being able to summon a Shark Chariot. Using it even on a Fleet Feather Tracker is good because it's a challenger unit, so the Fading Memories will have the ability to basically get free value out of... The ephemeral doesn't matter, right? Because it's going to be going in to die no matter what, right? So it just gives you flexibility for free. Fading Memories is a great flexible tool. I don't think I can run it as a 3-of in this deck. 2 feels very good right now, just for offering a bit of flexibility without being too clunky, as it were. Okay, so now that we know why everything is in the deck the way it is, let's talk about the cards that aren't in this deck, because I do think this is just as important of an area to discuss. So one big thing is the idea of Relentless Pursuit, which was actually in a very early version of this list. When I first looked at this idea, I was like, okay, Relentless Pursuit, that fits in, right? To be honest, it's not impossible that this card could fit in. It does fit the idea fairly well. But one thing I decided, first of all, I don't think Relentless Pursuit is an amazing card. It works with this deck in a unique way. I definitely could be able to fit it in as a 1-of. It's not impossible. But even though, like, you know, it fits in this deck, I think this card is sort of like win more in general. I think I'd rather play things that are actually impacting the board. Giving me more attacks is kind of only good when I already have Shark Chariot and Hecarim. And again, deck building 101, super important foundational principle. Do not put cards in your deck that are mostly there to help situations where you're already strong, right? Like, the deck is totally fine when I'm drawing Shark Chariot, when I'm drawing Hecarim. I don't need an extra attack in those situations. But when I'm drawing kind of bad and I'm struggling to control the board, right? I'm trying to like stall out and I'm trying to basically make, you know, my combo align. Like I get a weird opener. Let's imagine a weird opener. Maybe I draw like one Chariot but no Haunted Relic, no Lucian or something like that, you know? So like I can't do a lot with Chariot. Well, Fading Memories helps that because I can still pull Chariot out of my hand. And of course the kind of independent value packages like Keeper, Glimpse Beyond, you know, Vile Feast. Vile Feast is amazing in those situations, right? It's a bit more independent, you know, don't need no help from nobody. Vanguard Redeemer, that's going to be great in those situations because it's independent and it also helps me draw into my combo. But then it's like, if I have a hand like that in Relentless Pursuit, that's going to make me lose even harder, right? So you really want to help situations where where you need the help as opposed to helping situations where you don't need the help. Okay, so we're going to get to one of the big ones, which is Soul Shepherd. Now, this is something that I mentioned earlier in the video. It's a card that definitely could be proper in this list. I would need to find a way to fit it in. I am definitely looking to fit this card in this list, but I would have to... It's going to be a compromise either way, and one of the weaknesses of this card is kind of like the Ready the Attack thing. It is a little bit win more. It's a powerful card. It's not as powerful as it looks because its main strength is in situations where you've already kind of drawn your combo, and I will show you, footage of this deck kind of like going off. I haven't even recorded it yet, but when I record it, there will be big footage, and you'll see how powerful this deck is when it draws its combo. Soul Shepherd definitely might eventually be an inclusion for this list. Maybe by the time you're watching this video, it's already added to the Mobalytics link, but right now, as it currently is, I haven't decided like if I want to try to fit it in or what I would want to cut. It is a powerful card that is too good of an option to not really just try to jam in. Then we've got Oblivious Islander. Definitely could find a place in this list. It can be a little bit awkward for a few reasons. One of them is, again, it's kind of best when you have Chariot or Keeper in your hand, and it can't necessarily help hands that are really clunky. You don't really want to be using it on Hecarim in most situations, I find. Making your Hecarim ephemeral is usually a little too awkward, in my opinion, for Oblivious Islander to fit in. But, again, in this case, I'm not saying Islander is bad. I could definitely see fitting him in. This is a list that is pretty freshly made. I haven't playtested this because, I don't actually spend my time, like, playing, this client. I'm streaming every day and doing these recordings. Played a couple of games against bots. But basically, with Oblivious Islander, it could fit in, but I'm not really wanting to like go too far out of my way to try to make it work. And then we've got Hapless Aristocrat. You guys know this card. It's in like all of my Shadow Oz lists. I wasn't able to fit it into this list. And part of the reason for that is just because it's commitment to board space. And also, in regards to Hapless and Islander, I think this list probably wants to get away from turn 1 plays, maybe altogether. And let me actually explain this because it's a little weird. But basically, when you look at the 2-mana plays in this list, we've got Keeper, Glimpse, Relic, Lucian, Chariot, and even Vile Feast and Black Spear. So an extremely common line, and what I'm about to say is a pretty advanced deck building tactic that I don't think anybody is doing, and it's pretty niche, I will say. It's not common, but in a deck like this, I think this deck should aim to skip turn 1 because it has so many powerful 2s that combo together in different unique ways, and because so many of the 2s are spells as well, with Haunted Relic, Glimpse Beyond, and even like Vile Feast and Black Spear, which are kind of your reactive ones, but you'll often want to play them. I think that this list should basically always try to skip turn 1 so that you can play by turn 3 different 2-mana cards. This is actually really important for this list in particular. Like, check this out. A really common line of play is like on turn 2, we'll play Lucian, and then on turn 3, we'll have 1 banked mana from turn 1. So on turn 3, maybe we can play like Shark Chariot, Haunted Relic, or something like that. And then think about that. When we attack with Shark Chariot and all the relics, Lucian will level up on turn 3. A really, really, really big deal that a 1-drop doesn't help us with unless the opponent intentionally kills, which they won't do if they know how this deck works. Or if they kill it before Lucian's on the board, it doesn't help, right? Or look, if we have like Cursed Keeper, Lucian, Glimpse Beyond, then it's like we play Lucian on 2. Maybe if we're attacking on 2, then we get a chip damage in with a quick deck, maybe, sure. And then on 3, we play Keeper plus Glimpse, which will give Lucian 1 charge and will help the, develop the board state of this Escaped Abomination. This is a deck that is able to kind of play... It's a really weird deck building aspect of this game that nobody's really talking about, which is the idea of, because of mana preservation, you can build a deck around banking on a specific turn. So we can make this deck always bank around 1 mana and always capitalize on banking around 1 mana, which honestly might make Fleet Feather end up being a cut. Maybe I will cut Fleet Feather for Soul Shepherd, honestly. It could be, but Fleet Feather is still a good card because, of course, you do have the ability to have a... You play it later, right? It's not really meant for turn 1 so much as it is just for the idea of being able to have a 1/1 challenger is a really powerful concept, right? But yeah, that's one reason why Hapless and Oblivious don't end up fitting into this deck, and it's super important with deck building. I'm going to go 1 level deeper and explain that this is a deck, so everyone knows that Shark Chariot is really good when you are on evens, because Lucian's attacking on evens, because Lucian wants to attack on turn 2, Shark Chariot wants to attack on turn 2, Hecarim wants to attack on turn 6, right? So you kind of want to be attacking on evens. The Hecarim turn matters so much for the ability to attack on evens, which means there is one deck building element which is unique to Runeterra, which is if you have a deck that wants to be attacking on a specific turn, you want to use other aspects of the deck building, other choices where you have control over to help when you don't hit that, right? Think about that. If my win rate with this deck is 60% when I'm attacking on evens and 40% when I'm attacking on odds, which honestly might be true. It might be something like that. It's a big deal for a deck like this. Then helping the 40%, again, look at the math we did before, helping the 40% will help more than helping the 60%. It'll help 1.5 times as much, right? It's a pretty big multiplier for value. So we go back to this 2-2-2 combo that I'm talking about, and you might notice that it involves best being used when you are attacking on odds, right? Think about that. So when we have something like the, Lucian, Chariot, Haunted Relic combo, that's best when we're attacking on 3. So we're kind of diversifying our win conditions a little bit and getting more value out of gimmicks like that. It's a really cool part of this deck build that I think will probably end up being like coming together. I've only started thinking about this in the last like couple of hours, honestly, but we'll probably come together with like maybe a slightly different style of list, right? I mean, maybe it is a reason to cut Tracker for Soul Shepherd because it kind of plays into this same combo, right? Okay, last couple. So, oops. I typed in Senna. So a lot of people will be like, oh, you're running Lucian, where's Senna? I could actually see you running like one Senna in this list. I'm not super in love with the card, but she actually does kind of help when Lucian's dying a lot. The only problem is like Lucian will often be dying on turn 2. I'd have to think about it a bit more. I don't love Senna in general. Lucian usually isn't relying on her to level up in this deck, so she becomes a little bit more aimless, but if we're not drawing Haunted Relics, then Senna can be pretty good. And more importantly, even if you're leveling up Lucian, your lose condition is Lucian dying, which means that if you've got Senna on board, then if they kill your Lucian, then you're kind of forking them. You're getting a 3-5-3 with double attack. So Senna could definitely be a powerful addition to this list. I would have her. I wouldn't have her as a 3 of for sure. She'd be a 1 of or a 2 of. I could find a way to fit her in, but right now I don't think she's necessarily essential to the playstyle of this list. She would just kind of be a value piggyback off of Lucian, right? A big one is Chronicler. If you've seen a lot of my Shadow Isles decks, you might know, especially Dawn Spiders, how much like Keeper Chronicler is really great together. That's a really big one, but we don't have enough sack targets and we don't have enough board space, and it's kind of competing for the time that this deck doesn't want to play for, so it ends up just not really fitting in. And then Rasa. This is one of the strongest cards in the entire game, but again, this deck kind of blows the opponent out a little bit too quickly. We really want to just basically be ending the game earlier than this, and when we were drawing Hecarims, we're kind of ending the game anyway, so I don't think we really need Rasa. And then there's Rekindler as well. And with Rekindler, we have the ability to basically maybe res a Hecarim or a Lucian. I could see that. I could add one Rekindler in this list. That would be okay. But instead, I've chosen to put in back-to-backs. I think I like the ability of kind of protecting them from dying more so than resing them after they die. So that is potentially a consideration. Basically, everything from this list, these are things that I am actively considering putting in this deck list, but right now I am not sure exactly how I would fit them in. So these are like cards that could end up being in the deck list, in a bit. I'm not saying these are bad cards and this is the reason why I excluded them because they're bad. I'm just saying like I haven't been able to fit them in. It's a list of like, definitely potential cards. Some of them, more so than others for sure, but we just haven't gotten the fit yet. And that's it. That's basically a rundown of all the cards in the list, all the cards that might be in the list, but probably might not make the cut, all of them depending. We'll have to see how it all shakes down. Let's go ahead and take this deck to ladder. Like I said before, we're going to play 3 games, and we're going to see how this functions. All right, we get into a match against LeBron's James. Oh, that's weird. Okay, and he's going to be running some kind of... This looks like a weird like budget Fiora Barrier deck. Fiora Barrier is a deck that might have a really good matchup into this one. Let's see how this goes. So we've got Vile Feast, Curse Keeper, Glimpse Beyond Illusion, and we're attacking on evens. With mulligans, always look at which turn you're attacking. Super, super important. So Glimpse Beyond and Curse Keeper is a powerful combo. And there's not really anything we want to Vile Feast in this matchup. Not a lot dies at 1 health against like this Demacia Ionia deck. Unless he's running Green Glade Duo, which I don't know if this deck even wants to run. We could kind of take it this simply. I think this is fine, honestly. This opener of these 3 cards is going to be pretty good. We are attacking on turn 3. So most notably, if we had a turn 1 play here, we wouldn't do it, I think. I guess we might, because we're not attacking on 3. A really common spot in this game is going to be when you have a play you want to save mana for, like a big 3-card play for turn 3, and our entire hand costs 2. So a turn 1 play might actually be a trap. In this situation, we might want to bank that mana. So obviously, we're going to be looking to try to develop as much value as we can. Haunted Relic with Shark Chariot's just good. I think the Shark Chariot takes precedence here. It goes Chariot, and then Lucian Relic looks best. So taking like a Lucian Relic attack is going to be really powerful. He's going to take a barrier here, which means he's actually going to be able to block the Shark Chariot for free. I don't think this attack changes anything at all, except for, of course, the experience on the Hecarim, but he gets the free block. It's pretty good. I mean, barrier actually, the proactive barriers actually happen to get value against this deck, because my value is baked into my attack. Like, I can't really disentangle that, so he will basically just get a free block with a barrier that he normally wouldn't be able to get. He's going to start putting some pressure on me. We're down to 13. Oddly enough, this actually makes me, like, somewhat in a defensive position. Let's go ahead and develop our Lucian a little early. I don't really mind if he extends to kill this in some way, like if he uses like a weird single combat. So this is going to have to be fine. And again, we just want Lucian to get out before we are doing anything crazy. So now we're attacking on 4, and this is the big attack. We've got Chariot, we've got Lucian, etc. And Lucian's double attack is pretty powerful. So there's a lot of gimmicky plays we can do here, but the biggest play is just Cursed Keeper, Glimpse Beyond Haunted Relic. This is a really, really powerful play. And you'll see why. Like I said, we've got the 6 mana here, so let's take this line. We've got Keeper. If he threatens some weird 2 damage thing, I don't know what he could do that would even be 2 damage. And then let's take the Glimpse Beyonds on this, the Cursed Keeper. That's going to trigger 1 death for Lucian. And then a Haunted Relic is going to trigger the other 3. Now, you might be saying, well, Swim, you've got a Shark Chariot. Won't Shark Chariot trigger the 4th death? And the problem with that is it's actually not fast enough, because Chariot will come out on the right side of the board to trigger the 4th death. It'll always come out after the Lucian, which means Lucian won't level up for this combat phase. And it's pretty important that Lucian levels up for this combat phase, right? So we're going to go ahead and get our Chariot out. So always have these, and always try to have Lucian on the right side. We're going to go ahead and summon. See, Chariot comes on the right side. Lucian, because we killed the Keeper, is 1 out of 4. These 3 spirits will die no matter what. So Lucian is going to level up here no matter what. If he barriers the Fiora, that means they're going to take a trade. And that looks like what it's going to happen here, because Lucian has the double attack. That's not necessarily, you know, great for me. But it's fine. I mean, losing the Lucian... In an ideal world, the Lucian would live and just win us the game, but we're still getting a really good value trade here. And he's actually... Whoa, he's letting his Greenglade Caretaker go down to 1 in this matchup. That's kind of insane. That's super insane against Vile Feast. I mean, even if he's got barriers, usually it's not worth doing. But anyway, as you can see, we've laid down a lot of pressure. We have the leveled Lucian in our hands, and of course the Hecarim that is already 5 out of 8 ways to level up. Second Hecarim, wow, what a draw. And as a 5-1, this Vile Feast is just too tasty. At 1 mana, there's almost nothing he can do about this. We just can't not take this Vile Feast. It also represents a pretty good blocker into Brightsteel Protector. Although, Escaped A-Bomb is a good blocker against that too. So this is going to get Barrier. We're going to go ahead and take this block and let the Barrier smack us in the face. I'm more than happy to take 3 damage, basically, just to keep this Spider alive. The Spider might be going places, who knows. And I didn't really want to play Vanguard Redeemer there. I think it's more important to get the Lucian out. So there was an additional play where we could have tried playing the Lucian before the Vile Feast. Since we weren't going to block with the Spider anyway, and then we might have been able to get like a value ready to attack. That was actually a better play on that spot. So that was a bit of a misplay on my part. We take the Lucian early, and then we Vile Feast on the attack, because we weren't blocking with the Spider anyway. With the Vile Feast, it's not burst speed, so if you want to block with the Spider, you have to do it before the combat. But since we weren't blocking with the Spider, then, you know, we go to the Lucian. And if we want, we might have some option to rally. You know, who knows? Like, if we wanted to, I guess, like, sacrifice an Abomination against the combat trick, that pretty much wouldn't have happened. So we've got Hecarim and the leveled Lucian on board. We're going to go ahead and play out one of the Hecarims from hand. And you can see already how disgusting this is. So check this out. You know, he's put on a lot of pressure. He's already killed one of our Lucians. But look at what's happening to the board right now. We have Hecarim and the leveled Lucian. which is really, really, really powerful. So what this is going to mean is we are going to effectively take a full swing here. The Hecarim is going to level up, and we're going to leave Lucian on bench. We're going to do that very, very specifically. It's super important to leave Lucian on bench. First of all, Hecarim needs the room to summon the 3 ephemerals. He takes the level up here. And of course, in an Ionia deck, in a normal one, he might not be able to level this aggressively, or at least for as much value. Takes a super aggressive level here. We've got all 5s on these ephemerals, and you can see we're going to attack again right afterwards. A unit is doomed to die, and that's going to flip the Lucian here, okay? So, this is going to be a level up, and at 2 mana, there is nothing this poor soul can do. So, even without the level up, we already have lethal. This is 4, so he's going to be at -4 health already right now. And then on top of that, Lucian is also rallying, and we have a second attack with our leveled up Hecarim pulling more ephemeral units, right? So even if he had like a really developed board there, even if he had that, he would have been completely blown out. That's a super, super powerful deck when it's able to draw fairly well. Now, again, as pointed out, this deck, it does have some minor inconsistent draws. It's incredibly powerful when it draws well. I wouldn't say it's an inconsistent deck per se, because it's hard for your draws to be bad, but it is still going to be a bit less consistent than something like Dawn Spiders. I want you to know I'm not cherry picking these games. I'm not like recording multiple games and just showing you the ones where I drew well. This is the first game, and I've drawn very well. We're going to go into other games, and we're going to see how well I'm able to draw, and if there's any, like, you know, draw bad. Because there will be probably, like, 10 to 15% of situations where your combo is just, like, not there at all. It's really lacking. It's not going to be an auto loss. That's not, like, 10 to 15% win rate, but it's going to be definitely, like, your deck isn't blowing out like it's meant to. Okay, we get into another game against a Rioter. So we've got 2 Haunted Relics in hand. As much as I like Haunted Relic, it might be more of a one-of heap in this deck. When you've got Haunted Relic, you're really more interested in finding its combo pieces, those being Lucian and Remembrance. Now, we are attacking on evens, so that means Fleet Feather Tracker is going to lose some value. And we're against a Nox Shadow Isles deck, which makes Vile Feast a decent target. You know, we will be able to get some value out of that. It's not really what I want in this matchup, honestly. The deck is a little too weak. It doesn't threaten anything big that we need to kill at 1 health removal, and our deck is really combo-y, and we need to find Haunted Relic value. Vile Feast plus Fleet Feather does kill the Elise, though. I think the Elise isn't actually a big enough threat here. We're going to go ahead and take a bit of a greedy mulligan and kill the Fleet Feather Tracker in this case. Vile Feast is for decks that are actually able to aggro at a much higher tempo with scarier things that need to be killed at 1 health. Green Glade Duo being a really good example of that. But like against spiders, you know, I can kill a spider and that's fine value, but I can also just develop an unbeatable board and win out like that. And Elise isn't really too much of a threat here. Usually we can lay out enough pressure that he's forced to use Elise as a blocker. We can take this attack here. Attack with Keeper is a weird thing. Usually the opponent just can't block it. They can't risk the fact that you might not have a way to pop Keeper, and they might be giving you a unique enabler for the pop, unless they put you on being like a 3-of Chronicler of Ruin deck, in which case they probably should block. But at that point, they have to assume that you're kind of like taking a risky attack. So it's just risky to block Keeper no matter what. As you can see here, we have no real reliable way of popping Keeper in our hand. So 3-2 Arachnoid Horrors, pretty good card in that spot. We can't really get like value blocks here, so I think I'm fine just letting this through. This is gonna slap me in the face for a total of 6. Pretty spooky stuff. There it is, Hapless Aristocrat. So this is something that I could in theory block if I wanted to. This 1-1 looks like a spot for Vile Feast. Let's do some math. So next turn we're gonna have 7 mana. We want a Haunted Relic plus Vanguard for 5, and then a Remembrance for 6. Haunted Relic plus Vanguard for 5, and then a Remembrance for 6, and that's going to be a total board slots. So we aren't going to be able to fit that on the board if we use Vile Feast here. Unless he attacks with a Spiderling, which he's pretty incentivized to do. I'm going to take the safe line and burn 1 mana. Because if he leaves his spider back, which is A play that a smart player, I think, does, if I take the open Vile Feast and he, like, leaves the spider back, which he would do if he knew how this deck worked. I do want to assume, just in general, rule of thumb, I like assuming my opponents know how my decks work so that I can test their stability. I can test their power level even if the opponent knows how good the deck is. I don't want it to basically do something, like, gimmicky, really, right? Okay. So this just got a little weirder as well. We've got a total of 5 deaths. Lucian makes Remembrance not able to run as well. 4 deaths. Means we're not going to have enough mana for Remembrance. Oh god, this is actually so strange. This is such a bizarre spot. Oh, I think there's so many lines here. There's like Vanguard, Haunted Relic, Remembrance, or I go for the Lucian. I think Lucian is maybe more important to level up. That's such a difficult decision because I don't have enough mana to play everything. But I think the Lucian value is just a little bit too high here compared to the Silverwing Vanguard. As good as the Vanguard is, and it is really good, that's fine. We don't need to attack with Lucian, really. As good as the Vanguard is, the problem with Vanguard is I don't have enough board space or mana to afford all 3 options, and I really want to get out both my Lucian and my Remembrance. I think it's a little bit too valuable. Like, I can flip the Lucian this turn, or if I have like 1 additional death, which we don't have in this case. We have no like chariots or anything. We're not gonna Vile Feast, obviously. So we're gonna take this attack right here. These 3 Unleashed Spirits are going to die, and that's going to discount my Remembrance to 3 mana, and then I'll pop it off right here, okay? And that's exactly why, if you remember last turn, it might have seemed weird. I burned 1 mana, right? But Vile Feast cost 2, so I would have only been net 1 mana up, and I would be less on board space. You can see right now what I'm talking about, where board space potentially actually stops me playing certain things I want to play, right? So if I had used Vile Feast, even though I burned 1 mana, I would have 1 less mana here because it costs 2, and I wouldn't be able to get my Remembrance out on the big turn that I want to, right? This is a pretty difficult deck to play. You have to think about a decent bit of different things. And of course, we're keeping Vile Feast up, and we will have it for next turn when he does the attack with these 3 ones. That's, sorry, my dog's yipping. Alright, so he looks like he's got a pretty spooky board here, huh? But I feel pretty in control in this situation. Takes a decisive maneuver. Wow, a pretty powerful decisive maneuver here. Stun an enemy. I think that's fine. I'd like to potentially develop more blockers. I'm not really looking for anything crazy, so I'm happy to take a Vile Feast in this spot. I think we could do double Silverwing, I guess. Vile Feast into a post-combat Redeemer is also fine. I mean, I'm pretty happy to basically just I'm pretty happy to chill here. Pre-combat Redeemer basically gives us a blocker, but doesn't draw us a card. So it just comes down to whether I want to preserve my Nexus HP right now, or like how much I want to protect my HP. And right now, my HP is definitely like pretty awkward. That decisive maneuver happens to do pretty well against this. Yeah, I think not taking the Redeemer is a little too greedy here. Let's go ahead and take this, because we don't quite have enough like Nexus health to really afford taking this damage. Nexus health is obviously more important the less you have of it. Like at 20, you can afford to, and you should definitely try to sacrifice some of it to, you know, play better for the board. But when it gets down low, you need to play very protective of your Nexus health, right? So he's got no mana. We don't have to worry about like anything weird happening. He has nothing that won't kill Lucian. Lucian does have the ability to level up, which means it can block the Precious Pet and survive. We're going to have an ally basically take these trades for exactly that purpose. We're going to go ahead and go down to 5. So let's take this block. Redeemer is going to die. This is going to level up the Lucian, which gives him the +1/+1. He needs to survive against this Precious Pet. And the opponent's tapped out, so we're not really worried about Vile Feast. Vile Feast might hurt our Lucian next turn, but keep in mind we've got back-to-back, which can be a pretty powerful answer to it. So we're going to do a bit of a cheeky play, which is we're going to open attack with Lucian, I think. And if the opponent basically tries to not block it with Vile Feast, I guess there's not really enough reason they would have to not block it as well to play around the back-to-back. I mean, I can't use back-to-back and Relentless Pursuit on the same turn either. I mean, we definitely do have a win here if the opponent doesn't take a block. First time an ally dies each round, rally. He's not going to kill anything else, though. I mean, if we put him on Vile Feast, keeping back-to-back up doesn't really do that much, though. Because we don't have a death if we keep back-to-back up. No, actually we do. We can just open Butcher. I think opening Butcher is just the logical play. We should win on this turn. This should be pretty easy. Okay, so Lucian basically at 4-1. We've got the back-to-back that threatens protecting him against Vile Feast, and we're going to go ahead and swing for the fences here. A pretty powerful hit. Although actually we have a weird situation now. He isn't really using Vile Feast, right? That's kind of bizarre. Huh. This is actually quite weird. I mean, we can just take a big swing. I don't think the Silverwing Vanguard necessarily does quite enough here, since we only have one attack if we play the Vanguard. I'm just gonna swing it out. I'm just gonna keep Lucian on the right side for good habit building. Doesn't really matter when he's already leveled up, but, you know, I mean, just in general, the ability, as you saw on the last block, like when Lucian's on the right side, it does very well. For reference, by the way, I didn't mention this. When the opponent attacked last turn with Precious Pet on the right side, that was a misplay. If they had Precious Pet on the left side of that attack, I could not have blocked it with Lucian the way I did, because left resolves first. So if they had done that, I would have actually had to sacrifice Lucian, probably. So this is pretty interesting. We've committed ourselves out of the attack token, and he's gonna go ahead and take a really hefty amount here. This is 12, so he's at 6. Taking a committal block like that without like designating other blockers makes him very vulnerable to a bit of a cheeky play here, which is the back-to-back. He's playing greedy for the health, and let's just go ahead and punish him out with the best combat trick in the game. That's gonna be perfect lethal there, even with the Lucian getting blocked. So honestly, that play looked kind of bad from his part, but in reality, when you are in those board states, I don't think it mattered what he did, but when you are in those board states, Runeterra is a game all about kind of taking greedy non-blocks so that you can swing for lethal next turn. It's very much a race. It's a board race, and when you take usually board states will come down to, like, we both have developed boards, and how it works is when your opponent is doing their last big swing against you, you want to hold off as many blockers as you can. Not necessarily exactly like he was doing, but in a lot of cases, some similar things. You want to hold off some blockers so that when it's up to you, you can then end the game before they respond. That's a really important aspect of playing Runeterra that I think it's you know, super important to learn as a player. And I'll probably like make my own guide about that as well. But just as a rule of thumb, don't be afraid to take a little bit of extra damage at the end if it means you're gonna have more attackers on your turn to push lethal like at like the right timing, because you know, you effectively, by killing them one turn earlier, you're denying potentially an entire attack just by taking a bit of extra damage. All right, we get into the game here against a, looks like a starter spider deck. A lot of people are basically just gonna be messing around with starter decks here. So let's go ahead and break this down, how it's going to go. So we've got the opening hand with Fleet for the Tracker, Lucian, and Remembrance, and we're attacking on evens. Whenever you're mulliganing, look at the turn you're attacking. It's really important to deciding, you know, whether to prioritize certain options or not. In this deck, we really want to find a Haunted Relic. Because I'm not attacking on turn 1, I actually will kick Fleet for the Tracker. Because A, I'm not attacking on turn 1, and B, I think it's really important to get a Haunted Relic here in a hand like this, where we already have the pre-developed Lucian and Remembrance. Because we're only mulliganing fewer options, and because I really, really want that card, I do have to take a more aggressive mulligan. I would normally keep Fleet Feather Tracker in normal situations with this deck. Alright, we go into turn 2, and we nail our Haunted Relic. Perfect. So we have the ability to play our Lucian out a bit aggressively here. We're going to be looking to flip it on turn 4 with Relic, okay? And get a big Remembrance on that turn. That's going to be kind of our setup. So, it's kind of like Spider Starter deck. There's not a lot of threats. Wow. Glimpsing the rear guard. So that's a play. In this case, that play makes no sense. You want to be using Glimpse Beyonds on units that are either already dying to threats or are blockers. The best way to use Glimpse Beyond is basically by developing a blocker, and then when you go to block, then you glimpse it, and you're kind of just getting the glimpse for free if your blocker was going to die, like a chump blocker, right? Like a 1/1. We draw second Lucian, which is a Relentless Pursuit, which actually isn't as good for this deck as it might initially seem, and we're just going to go ahead and develop the Cursed Keeper. I think in this case is going to have to be fine. We don't really want to play Vanguard Redeemer without it drawing a card here. It gives us a blocker for the Undying, but as the aggressor, I'm very willing to just tank this damage, and also, you know, the Undying comes back stronger anyway. We're not really looking to block it, okay? So, we've got the Haunted Relic here, we've got the Silverwing Vanguard, and we have the ability to basically go in. It's not a perfect hand. In a perfect hand, we would be able to play Haunted Relic for nothing, but we do want to flip our Lucian. I think it's too important to not do. We're out of board space here. Wow, this is actually such a weird draw. If we hadn't played the Cursed Keeper, if we had the Vanguard in hand already, we could have done Relic Vanguard and flipped our Lucian. We really, really, really want the Lucian to flip. We just have too awkward of a hand here. Man. That is actually really unfortunate. That's super unfortunate that we can't flip our Lucian. It's gonna have to be fine, though. I think we pretty much have to do this. So that doesn't change my play here at all. Basically, so imagine... So what I'm talking about is, if we had one more board space, imagine how this plays out, right? So we play the Silverwing Vanguard for 1 copy and trade with this. Oh, he's going to go ahead and take the kill anyway. I think that's fine. I think there's pretty much no problem with this. This is going to allow us to get a higher value Remembrance in terms of the mana cost. So I think that's also fine. And we've got the other Lucian as well to come down. Let's go ahead and play the other Lucian out here. That's going to be fine. So we're going to play the other Lucian out. We're going to go ahead and swing with everything. Good habit building is Lucian on the right side. It doesn't really matter in this case, but if you imagine like we had one more death, then Lucian levels up during the combat. So basically what I was talking about is, if we had one more board space, we could have played the Vanguard. We could have Vanguarded into his Undying to kill it, and to kill our own Vanguard. We don't actually want to kill his Undying, but if we can allow another death, then our Lucian during this attack will flip during the attack. He'll level up if we put him on the right side, and then he'll deal 8 damage to the Nexus because he levels up with double attack, and that would have been really powerful. We'll have to settle, though, for our 2 mana Remembrance, which is, of course, really, really powerful. This is kind of a large part of the purpose of this deck, okay? So we've got Swiftwing Lancer coming out here, and this looks fine. Okay. So we've drawn back-to-back. It's pretty good timing for back-to-back. We're going to be looking for a Hecarim on these turns as well. Usually you'll have one by now, but we're going to have to basically try to get into one. But we don't have Shark Chariot, so it's not like the biggest deal in the world. Usually he's only really nuts when we've got the Chariot going on. Okay, so he's got some attacks. We want to pre-develop some blockers. I think there's probably just no better play than Silverwing Vanguard here. I don't really like keeping the mana up for back-to-back this early. Back-to-back is a really good play on like turn 6 or 7. Like sometimes you can play it as early as 5, but reasonably speaking, you shouldn't really expect that to happen, right? And again, we're just going to let this Undying slap us. This is kind of like the nature of this card. I can block it later. I'm in no hurry. My Nexus health is high, and more importantly, it's higher than his, and I'm the aggressor. So his Nexus health matters more, and mine matters less, because I'm the one that's going to be bursting him down very, very soon here. Lucian is taking the level up, and we've got the back-to-back as well. So if there's not really an answer he can do here, we should just be able to force a blowout. Let's go ahead and challenger this and threaten lethal in this way. Like I said, good habit building is putting Lucian on the right side. It doesn't matter in this case, but let's go ahead and do this. So, he's gonna interact with one of our cards. He basically needs to try to, like, you know, hit our Lucian or something. So Withering Wail is going to effectively just stop this attack. Our Lucian's going to slap him in the face for a total of 8. We've got this going for 5, and as you can see, he's dead on this sheet. I'm going to go ahead and win this in a bit fancier of a way, though. Not that it really matters at all. Yeah, let's just do this. We can take it back-to-back here, because this means Lucian is dealing a total of 14 damage. Our Swiftwing Lancer is dealing a total of 8, so he's going to be at -9. -9 now. So that's one way the deck can play out. We had kind of the decent opening draw. We didn't have any Shark Chariots or Hecarims. The deck kind of plays for 2 different things. But as you can see, the deck is built in a way where between Shark Chariot and Hecarim, and, you know, the whole, like, Lucian combo package, when you get both of them, it's super powerful. Even when you get one or the other, you still have a really, really powerful finisher condition.